and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer, the Fred Rogers of board game review shows. Won't you be my neighbor? Ladies and gentlemen, don't you just hate living on those over farms? Well, not to worry, because Privateer Press has come out with the Undercity, an Iron Kingdom's adventure board game. Let's take a look! In the Undercity, an Iron Kingdom's adventure board game from Privateer Press, 2 to 4 players are essentially going to be able to go on this kind of grand dungeon crawl adventure as they're searching for a murderer and trying to find out kind of some clues as to what happened there. Now, there are 7 chapters or 7 scenarios, and of course, it's a campaign. You play one scenario, and it leads into the next, etc., 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 until you can, of course, finally win all of them. But you can play each scenario individually as well. Now, the very first thing you're going to do is select a character, a hero that you're going to play. And there's all sorts of different weird heroes you can play. For instance, there is a giant mechanical man who has kind of a little guy that runs him. You have the cute little redhead. You have Bane. And you also have some weird, funky monster. They all have fun little names as well. Now, you got to choose the scenario. Of course, you're playing the campaign. You just pick the next one naturally, or you can kind of pick and choose whatever one you want to play. You, of course, have to set up the board. You have to set up your various health icons. You're going to get feat decks and feat cards, which are going to let you do special abilities during the game. You're going to go ahead and get an alchemical restorative token that's going to help you kind of bring back some other players from the edge of death, as it were. Now, according to the scenario, you're also going to prepare event decks, the villain deck, and you're also going to put out the various villain cards and villain figures. Some of them go on the board, some of them go near the villain cards. Now, every round, you're going to start by picking an event card from the event deck. You're going to draw the first event card, and that's going to set up specific rules for that round. It's going to set up some various information you're going to need to know for that round. And critically, it's either going to be red or it's going to be blue. And that's going to be important because that's going to determine a certain kind of preference and priority for villains in different parts of the game. Now, at the beginning of your turn, you're going to spawn villains. You roll a dice, which is going to tell you which villain comes out. And each of the villain cards has little kind of these number triangles by them, and that, when you roll that specific number, it brings out one of those villains. If there's not a villain there, you're going to activate one of the villains that's already on the board. After you roll that, you're going to roll a second die that's going to tell you where that is going to spawn. Within the scenario setup on the board, there's going to be different kind of numbered passages which tell you where these things are going to come out. Next, you have the activation phase. Now, this is the phase where you move your character. All things being equal, they can move one space, but you can kind of sacrifice some of your abilities and your ability to roll more dice if you kind of move 2 spaces. If you hold still and you use a ranged weapon, you may get a boost, you may get an extra dice. Otherwise, if you move, you're going to kind of lose some of those extra abilities. And there's different kinds of weapons that each of the characters has. Some of them have different cool and funky ranged weapons. Some of them have different kind of melee weapons, and they're each going to have kind of different advantages to using them, and you're going to pick which weapon you're going to use before you do it. And of course, you can use each of your weapons of a certain type whenever you're activated. Now, using your weapons, of course, can lead to combat. That's why you're going to use your weapons. And this happens in a very interesting way. Now, first of all, you have to determine whether or not you get a hit. So you roll kind of your weapon's strength, you roll the necessary dice, and you add kind of its power value to your die roll. Then you match that up against your enemy's kind of defense ability. If it's greater than his defense ability, you get a hit. But now you've got to roll for damage. So now you kind of, again, roll some dice, you roll the power associated with that weapon, and if that is greater than the enemy's armor value by, I think, 4 or less, you get kind of 1 hit. If it's greater than 5, you get 2 hits. The last thing you're going to do on your turn is draw a new feat card. Now, you can only ever have 3 feat cards out there. You start the game with 3 feat cards, and so if you haven't used any of your feat cards, you have to discard one of them in order to place the new one, the one that you want there in your player area. Finally, the last thing you're going to do is draw a villain card. And when you draw a villain card, then the villains are going to move, and they're going to move along these kind of preset little instructions they've got at the bottom of each card. It says, okay, what is their priorities? Are they going to move first? Are they going to attack first? Are they going to, hold and fire? What are they going to do? And it's right there. There's some icons, and of course you have kind of a player aid cheat sheet that tells you exactly what all the icons do, so you constantly know how the villains are going to move according to those rules. Now, very often the villains are going to attack the heroes, and the heroes kind of have hearts that kind of are their vitality number, and if ever they get hit, you flip one of those over so it's on kind of its damaged side. It's got a little skull on it. Pretty scary. Now, if all of your health, your vitality is gone, you flip the character over, and another character can come into your same space. He can go ahead and give you his alchemical restorative token to bring you back. In that case, you can flip your tokens up, and then on your next turn you can flip up and get back into the game. But after a while, if you're not restored, you start losing your health tokens. They leave. So if you eventually are restored, you're going to come back into the game with less health than when you started. So that's, in a nutshell, how the mechanics of the game works. And there's, of course, the different things that can trigger the end of the game. If you run out of the event cards, that's your timer, game's over. If you are all killed, if you're all neutralized, then game's over, you lose. But if you fulfill the specific conditions of the scenario, you win. Now, I should point out, too, there's also some side quests. There's some side quest cards around there. You can go there, you can pick those things up, and hopefully they can make you more powerful, make you more stronger, make it easy for you to fulfill those victory conditions. Now, at the end of the chapter, what you're going to do is go ahead and, for every time you hurt the villains, you get some XP. And the XP goes on a little treasury board, and then at the end of the game, you're going to divide that equally. If you have to do it unequally, then you can just grab some treasury tokens out of the pool, and so everybody's got an equal number. Then what you can do is go through your ability deck, and each character has their own ability deck. You can go ahead, buy some ability cards that will kind of, again, soup you up, make you more powerful, make you more able to fulfill the victory conditions on subsequent chapters. So that is the Undercity. It's a very kind of basic standard dungeon crawl in a lot of ways. It's not terribly hard to learn. It's a fairly easy game to get into if you know the basics of how a dungeon crawler works. So what are my thoughts on the Undercity? So I have a mid-level complaint here, and that is that the game board is kind of uninteresting. It's just this kind of basic cobblestone board. You put up some darker walls or some stairways, some other things there that you can kind of throw in, but just nothing that's terribly visually interesting about the board. And that is disappointing because it's just not necessarily that fun to look at. And what makes it even more disappointing is the minis in this game are beautiful. They are awesome. The minis in this game are fantastic. I think they are absolutely beautiful, and it's too bad the board, visually, the aesthetic there didn't match the aesthetic of the minis. I love the absolute look of the minis. Card production is great, and the artwork is phenomenal. Really like the artwork here. It is top-notch, something you've always come to expect from Privateer Press. They do some great artwork, and generally their production values are pretty high in most of their games. Gameplay itself, this is, as I say, a pretty standard dungeon crawler. There's not a lot of new surprises here. Except, I will say this, I was kind of surprised at just how easy to learn and to play and to get into this was. And part of that was perhaps because Privateer Press has a great tutorial video out there you can watch that really gives you the basics of this game and lets you jump right into it. And so that really helps. It helps you visualize as you're reading the rule book. It's like, oh, okay, I got that. Very, very easy game to learn. In fact, I dare say it's probably one of the easier dungeon crawls as far as learning it goes. The game itself is fun. It's a fun game. It's interesting. It's again, dungeon crawls like we've seen elsewhere. You know, like Super Dungeon Explorer, Arcadia Quest, Imperial Assault. Very similar here. Of course, it's cooperative, and some of those games have competitive aspects to it, or an all-against-one aspect to it. This is a purely cooperative game. The cooperative mechanics, the AI of the game, which spawns stuff, is good. It works. It's easy. It's intuitive. Again, it goes in there. And so it's a game you can just kind of get into, and okay, this works, and that's really good as well. I enjoyed that. On the whole, I think the Undercity is a very good game. I really enjoyed it. If you like dungeon crawlers, this is a good one. Now, my only real caveat when I say that is this. We are kind of we've kind of arrived at a point where the question is, there are so many dungeon crawlers out there of quality, which one do you get? And I've got to tell you, my personal favorite dungeon crawler, a game like this where your characters were going to meet objectives, is another game from Privateer Press that is Level 7 Omega Protocol. To me, Level 7 Omega Protocol is my gold standard of dungeon crawlers. It's just brilliant. Now, that's an all-against-one. It's not a purely cooperative game. It's an all-against-one, but the way the mechanics work and the way how the good guys take actions, and that feeds the abilities of their opponent is really, really interesting. So, if you're only going to buy one, I'd probably recommend Level 7 Omega Protocol of all of them out there. But, still, Imperial Assault from Fantasy Flight's really cool. That's got the Star Wars theme, and that's a lot of fun. Super Dungeon Explorer is a fun game. But there's something really interesting here about the Undercity, and I can't quite put my finger on it. There's just something charming about it. And maybe it is that ease. Maybe it was because it is a game you just, I think, it's fairly easy. It's not necessarily a nose in the rule book every 5 minutes game. I mean, we did look up rules, don't misunderstand me, but it's not just like, oh crap, now, okay, how does this work, and how does this work? It just came rather intuitively. So I really, really enjoyed the Undercity. I think it's a fun game. I think if you want a dungeon crawler, particularly a cooperative dungeon crawler, this does it very, very, very well. So the recommendation for the discriminating gamer for the Undercity, an Iron Kingdom's adventure board game, is buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We ask you to please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. We are The Discriminating Gamer, and the Undercity takes place in this underground lair that's kind of labyrinthine, and I really, really wish at some point you would run into a David Bowie as Jareth little action figure Goblin King mini with a bulge.